Hello, this is a quick introduction to computer programming, explaining what it is, so that if you want to learn programming, you have a basic understanding of exactly what you're doing before you embark. Um, Many of you are not familiar with the concept of computer programming because these days most people operate their computer at a very high level using sophisticated programs. If you go on Facebook or if you go on YouTube, um, all you have to do is drag your mouse around, click things, send an email message, open a little text box and send stuff, um, type some things in, but that's not programming. That's using a computer. It's a very important way to use a computer. The computer is so powerful, and all the programming is behind the scenes. Um, Most people never even type in a line of actual computer code. But, um, like I just said, there's a ton going on behind the scenes, and people who do computer programming are the ones who design and implement that behind the scenes activity. If you learn computer programming, you can be one of those people. There's a lot to learn. You can't learn it overnight, but you can learn a lot of stuff pretty quickly. And if you like it and you're inclined to it, you can study it at school or on your own, and perhaps it will help you in your job or at school, or in your job hunt. Programming is not extremely difficult. It does require a lot of focus, um, requires you to be interested, and requires you to have neat habits. So give it a try, and maybe you'll discover a new way of learning and making money, or a hobby or something like that, and you can set off on your road today. So what is programming? Unlike operating a computer by just hitting a mouse, um, programming requires you to write instructions to the computer, and they're not unlike regular language. Um, you instruct the computer to uh, perform operations and provide some kind of output. You basically um, prepare the computer to accept input from the user, and then you do something with that. The program does something with that input, turns it around, adds to it, changes it, multiplies it, whatever, and then outputs the result of what it's done. So, and then repeats as many times as necessary. So telling the you're helping the computer help the user by manipulating the user's input in some way. Um, there are two languages that I'm making slideshows about, uh, which will help you learn one or the other computer language. HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language. That's the language we use to write web pages which display information on the web. It's pretty basic stuff. It's kind of like writing a visual presentation on the computer, except you use a lot of code. Um, and you may say, well, there are website builders to do that. There's Wix, and there's um, any number of other page builders, and they're all very good. Or just Facebook, which builds you a page instantly. They're all very good and very useful, but HTML or other markup languages are the language behind which sit behind Facebook and all the others. So if you learn HTML, you can learn how to work at one of those companies eventually. You'd have to work pretty hard for a long time to get a job at Facebook, but HTML is the basis of all the things you see on the web. It's the mechanics behind them. Another language I'm going to do slideshows about is C++. That's a language with a lot more procedure in it. C++ allows you to take data and move it around, change it. It's used for mathematical processing. It's used for the processing of large amounts of files. It's used for controlling industrial processes. HTML is a lot more passive. Basically, you write something and it displays for people to read. People interact with it to the extent that they move around the pages. C++ is the language where you put a lot of input in and some big operation is done with it. Perhaps you take a set of numbers and you run some kind of mathematical operation on those numbers, or you put a bunch of data in different order. It's a lot more sophisticated than HTML, but it's not impossible to learn. It's pretty simple. You don't have to know any real high math to know it, and it's very easy to get started, which is why I did these slideshows. So computer programming requires you to learn code. Code is a special language which kind of looks like written or verbal language. You have to be able to understand it. It's kind of like learning a language, not too difficult. But code is standardized, meaning whenever you write a piece of code, it should work the same every time you write it, everywhere you put it. It's predictable if it's been properly designed. If you don't properly design it, it might do unpredictable things. But code can also be modified. Code can be written to modify itself. When needs change, you can add procedures or remove them. If it's written in a standard, it should, like all other code, always do the same thing in the same situations. That's the value added of computers, is they can always be relied on to do the same thing over and over again in the same situations, giving you economies of scale, giving you the ability to do huge numbers of operations very quickly. And that's how Amazon and all these other powerhouses make their money. So let's start with web programming with HTML. It's the simpler of the two languages. I have a number of tutorials up on it, and I'll give you a quick view of what HTML looks like, so hopefully it's not intimidating. HTML is called a markup language. Now, what's markup? In the old days, markup was what you did when, you may have seen this in old movies, when a newspaper editor has the paper proofs, the paper template of what a newspaper is going to look like the next day, he might go around and do some things with a pencil on it, make little marks to change the layout of the page, remove this, move this over here, etc. There are little special marks he used to do all of that. Those were called markup. It was a little coded language. And this is the same thing in the computer system. What you do is you take a piece of text, just like you might read or write or speak, and then you add some markup to it, and that makes it displayable in a web browser. The web browser can't read just regular text, Word, Microsoft Word, or a text editor can read regular text you write in, but that's not displayable over the web in a web browser. Adding markup will make regular text displayable in a web browser. This is what markup looks like. The letters in black, welcome to Font Effects, and down middle bottom on the right, a bunch of names of fonts. Those are the things that will appear on the page to the user. The stuff in green, blue, and red, you don't have to know all this stuff right now. These are the behind-the-scenes pieces of language. These are behind-the-scenes words and marks which command the computer to display the text in a certain way. So let's see what this looks like. A web programmer typed this and typed it in a text editor. It looks like this, and it's an intentional design to produce a web page, which will look very different. Let's see what the web page looks like. That's what the web page looks like. There's a nice picture of a wheat field in the back, and it's just a list of different fonts. Each of these fonts is, the name of the font is the font that it's displayed in, kind of meta. Just a very simple page, and you remember the markup had a list of 6-7 fonts there, and what they looked like, or how they were to be displayed. Up at the top we have some text formatting information. You'll learn all about that. Text formatting on the top between the two things that say style. That little bit of information tells the computer to display in Lucida. Middle of the page there's a direction to display a image of a wheat field that I loaded into the computer in a neighboring file, and that little text tells the computer that the background of the page is going to be the wheat field. And then the bottom part of the page where you see all those things that say style, those are the letters and those are the words that appear on the page. Looks like a lot of stuff. It is a lot of stuff, but this isn't too difficult to learn. You'll notice the language kind of repeats itself a lot. There's a lot of cutting and pasting and just changing little things in HTML. You'll learn all this stuff. This again is what the page looks like. It's pretty simple. You can do, this is a nice looking page basically because of the photograph, but with a little bit of code you can get a very nice looking page provided you get a good photograph in the background. This, I think, looks pretty stylish. I don't know. These big simple photographic backgrounds are very popular right now. This again is the page. As you can see, this is only a couple hundred bytes of information. It's extremely efficient and loads instantly. It's a tiny amount of information. A lot of the actual processing is done by the web browser. The web browser sees that you order a font in Verdana, and the web browser displays it in Verdana. You don't have to send all the information. You don't have to send the original Verdana font over the internet to the viewer. You just tell the computer at the viewer's end to display the stuff in Verdana. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but this is a pretty simple, pretty quick program to write to make a nice looking page. And if you pick the right image, this is the image does take a good bit of effort to transmit because images always take more space than font, than simple text information. But you don't add the image. The image is not part of the HTML file. The HTML file merely contains a little reference. So how do you write markup? How do you do all of this? It's not difficult. It's a lot simpler than you'd think. All you need is Notepad or the Chrome text editor or Text Wrangler on Apple. You don't need Microsoft Word or anything. In fact, those programs don't work for this. You don't need a fancy web programming kit. In fact, the simpler the better. You type in the code like the stuff we saw before, the markup, and then you save it with an HTML file extension. You don't, not a text or WPS or anything file extension. You save it with a .html, and what that does is makes it visible to web browsers. Web browsers can't read Word documents or Excel spreadsheets. They read .html. So if you save your markup as a .html, it can be opened in a web browser. You can look it up in your regular directory. Click on it, and then the web browser will open up immediately because it has a .html file extension. Later on, you'll just create links to get to your page. Right now, we're just saving stuff on a regular file directory. We're not putting we won't be putting anything on to the web for a long time. And then so you'll just be looking at stuff sitting on your computer, and you'll be opening it using your file directory, but it will render exactly like it would if it was published on the web. In fact, this started out as something that didn't work. The web didn't exist. It was used simply to display stuff in local computers. And then later on, way later on, you can learn how to make web HTML dynamic by adding programming bits. So you can type in things and the web browser will change your data in some way that you direct it. That's a long way away. Right now, HTML, all we're learning is basic passive displays, and that's a lot to learn. So, but the other computer language I have tutorials for that you should think of is C++. This is a very advanced, it's not difficult to learn, but it's a very advanced tool. This is what the space program uses. This is what people use in Google and Facebook to build things for the web, or build things for the back office of the web, heavy data processing and stuff. It's more advanced, takes more to learn, but there's great demand for C++ programmers. You could use this to boost your education, perhaps get educated in a better career. C++, like I said, is more dynamic and complex than HTML, but it's more powerful. It has any kind of use. Anything you want to model or simulate, anything you want to organize, anything you want to process, move around, rearrange or by a rule, any large chunks of data that you want to make march in lockstep, anything where you want to find something in a needle in the haystack, C++ is what you can use. And C++ code, little more, of course it looks like gobbledygook to you now, but this is a simple, complete C++ program. And you'll see that it kind of looks like an algebra equation, it kind of looks like a riddle. There are different parts that I'll show you how they put together, and you can quickly learn pretty simple programs, provided you follow pretty precise rules. There's not a lot of artistic expression in computer programming. It's very standardized. But for example, look at the little arrows here. The first thing the computer does is declare a variable. It says, okay, we're going to have a counter, kind of like a variable in algebra. It's a word that stands for a value, and like in algebra, the value can change, and when you refer to the word, you're referring to the value as it changes. We create a variable called counter. We assign it a value of 0, and then we increment it up 10 times. We add 1 to it 10 times. That's all that one line there with the 3 arrows, the two arrows. You declare the variable, and then you add 1 to it from 0 to 10. And then next line, fourth line down, we print out the number. And what this does is it prints out the number 10 times. 0 to 9 is 10. We've instructed the computer to print out the number, add 1, print out the number, add 2, add 1, print out the number, add 1, up until it's done it 10 times. And so it goes from 0 to 9 because that is 10 increments. It's pretty simple. That wasn't a particularly difficult program. once you learn the rules, you can write that very quickly, and provided it is written according to the rules, it will work and be very helpful. Um, it's not much beyond that to write something that will, for example, figure mortgage payments or bond rates, or um, uh, count down the days to something, or count the number of times you do something. Pretty simple. Um, once you've learned the little rules, which I will show you in my tutorials. So how do you code C++? There's a program called an integrated development environment. It's a computer program like a higher computer program like Word or Excel or something, but you type in your programming, and the computer takes it and corrects its language, makes certain it's accurate, runs it, and prints out the result, all in one little integrated development environment program. All you have to do is load the integrated development environment program. Mine are written for either Android or Chrome. This is the interface that I use. It's called Mobile C. This is taken from the tablet. I had a little 7-inch Amazon Android tablet because I like buying my computers at Whole Foods. And this is what it looks like when you type the code in. The code we saw before has been typed into the IDE. I have a little Bluetooth keyboard. I suggest you get one of those. You can get it for $10 from Alibaba if you have a tablet, or even a phone, an Android phone. It also works for Chromebook. The thing is, Mobile C, the app is free. Works beautifully. It's very simple to use because Android apps are designed to be easy to use, and you just type the stuff in and hit the little button at the corner that says, little arrow over to the right that says run code, and let's see what the output of this code is. Well, we saw what the output of this code was. It was a list of numbers from 0 to 9, and if you followed the rules and didn't put in any stray marks and made all the marks correct, if you use the rules of the language, the underlying formula for the program produced this output. So you'll learn that in a few short lessons if you follow the links at the end of this to my C++ tutorials. They're presented one after another with increasing complexity to each. But from the very first one, and this is what it's designed for the very first one, you're writing a program and running it. From the very first one, you have done a computer program, and that's a big step for people. Most people don't ever write a computer program. You're going to write one after a 20-minute YouTube slideshow. That's pretty amazing, and it's everything you need to do the programming is in the YouTube video, provided you have an Android device and Mobile C. You don't even need an Android keyboard for the first couple of lessons. If you're good at thumb typing, that'll do it. Okay, so C++ is more advanced than HTML. Like I said, they use it to do heavy-duty data processing, billions of records. They use it to handle very complex communication. The stuff behind the internet is done in C++ or other high-level languages. The simple stuff is displayed in HTML, but one web page that you see, that web page could have hundreds of elements, and it's being displayed to tens or hundreds of millions of people all at once. That's an incredible amount of power. It's incredible amount of complexity, and you need C++, which is a wonderfully ordered and logical language, to do something like that. You can use C++ to write simulators, um, to model some kind of phenomenon. You could build a little farming simulator, a weather modeler, anything that follows some kind of numerical process like adding, subtracting, dividing. Um, Card game simulator or something. Very easy to do in C++. A lot of this code is already written. All you have to do is get it and download it later on. But that's another important use of C++. It's also used in heavy industrial and scientific stuff. It runs robots. It helps coordinate the mapping of weather when you have thousands of weather sensors or millions or billions of Internet of Things sensors across the world. C++ is the backbone of a lot of that stuff. Other languages that are similar, Python or Pascal or C, I do C++ because that's what I chose, and C++ is somewhat easier to use early on because some of the printing formatting is easier to do. The other languages are just as good, but maybe I'll do a tutorial on one of those later. So programming is fun. The tools are free. All you need to do is watch a few YouTube videos, and I suggest get a book. Books can be had off of a Libris used for $2. Borrow one from the library. Lots of stuff online. I suggest you use from paper book, because learning things from a website, often it throws you somewhere in the middle of something and you need to proceed from the beginning and go to the end. That kind of incremental from beginning to end treatise is a little more difficult to find on the web. A book is designed to do that. So right now, here are the links to an HTML tutorial if you want to start easy and learn to publish stuff to the web. Click that link, and click the C++ link if you would want to learn a more high-level language and get started on the world of data processing. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy your computer learning experience. Leave questions in the comments if you wish. And if you don't like my tutorials, use someone else's. YouTube is full of hundreds of them. I've designed this one to be slightly different because it's on a slightly simpler level, and I try and make them shorter and simpler, and the design is more sparing. Some people will like that. So thank you for watching, and hit the link to one of the others.